Hola. So let's relate this again to dream yoga, these shamatha practices. The practice in which we're really attending to the contents of the mind from the stillness of awareness. So like cows and sheep, or like the raven. If we can practice that, if you're one of those people who falls asleep easily, that could take you directly from the waking state right into a lucid dream. Just directly right into it. So that could be very useful. Now this practice that we've begun today of just not really having any interest in the contents of the mind, whatever, just kind of not my issue, just focusing on awareness. This practice is just a direct route to going into lucid dreamless sleep. Very useful, very useful. And maybe I'll mention it now in case I should forget it later. We've already covered mindfulness of breathing as being a very good way to fall asleep if you're a vata type of person, mentally active. The other one, if you easily fall asleep, this practice of just resting in awareness itself, it's good for everybody. I've tried it many, many times. And although I do have very much of a vata mind, pitta vata, fire and wind, this one does not arouse the mind. It doesn't jack it up. It doesn't do that. It's just awareness. So you can definitely fall asleep that way. Quite useful. So a little bit of that. So we'll have a silent session, and it can be any one of the practices, mindfulness of breathing, settling the mind, shamatha without a sign. But as I mentioned before, you could do earth and wind. Do you remember that? That combination where you start with mindfulness of breathing, grounding in the awareness, and wind, facing into the wind of thoughts, emotions, whatever, from the stillness of awareness. So it's a nice combination. The first one to get the conceptual mind to calm down a bit, and then the second one, when it's no longer a hurricane, but merely a good stiff breeze, just thoughts coming up. Then the second half, going into that one. And then again, shorthand, balancing earth and sky. It's a combination I very much like. Again, starting with mindfulness of breathing, always a very soothing, gentle way to begin. And when you do have that relative calm, the mind has calmed down somewhat, then going directly from that right into awareness of awareness. So earth and wind, earth and sky. Two very nice combinations. So you might experiment. So let's have one silent session. Volume 1. I think that's longer than my life is. My life's a short story. This is definitely a novella. So, a couple of comments might be helpful, going right back to lucid dreaming and some of the very ingenious methods that have been developed by modern scientists, researchers in the field that I haven't mentioned before. One is a reminder, the first one, and that is in terms of our daytime lucid dreaming practice, to recall vividly the nature of prospective mindfulness. You remember that? So just a very brief review. Retrospective sati, mindfulness. It is recollection. And that's a classic Buddhist meaning, it always has been. That there's retrospective mindfulness, that's recalling something from the past, easy, it's remembering. There's present-centered mindfulness, where you're bearing in mind something that is occurring in the present, such as the in and out breath. And then prospective mindfulness, prospective recollection, is remembering to do something in the future. And this prospective mindfulness is very central for the modern discipline of lucid dreaming, and equally indispensable for the same reason in the classic teachings on dream yoga. So for daytime lucid dreaming, then your task when you get up in the morning is to establish, if you wish to do the practice, establish the prospective mindfulness that throughout the course of the day, should you at any time, unexpected, they'll just come up, encounter an anomaly, remember that, or encounter one of your dream signs. If you have listed at least one or two, either one, maybe the dream sign's not an anomaly at all. Being at an airport, there's nothing anomalous about that, but that's one of my dream signs. But either one of these, and the prospective memory here, from the lucid dreaming side, which I find very, very sharp, is the prospective memory is to remember to do two things. One is if you see either an anomaly, which is very likely not a dream sign, or you see one of your dream signs, recognize it as such. Recognize the anomaly as an anomaly. Tell yourself that's an anomaly. Or if it's a dream sign, see the dream sign, recognize it as a dream sign. Tell yourself, that's one of my dream signs. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is to do something. It's quite ingenious. First know something and then do something. And the do something at any time during the daytime, in your daytime lucid dreaming, is to do a state check. Do a state check. And make that a habit as much as you can. The more you're committed to this, the more frequently you'll do it. And then just sooner or later, if you have that resolve, that persistence, then that habit will carry right over into the dream. And sooner or later, dreams are anomalous all over the place, and dreams often have dream signs. You'll be cruising along quite sure you're not dreaming. You'll see an anomaly or a dream sign, and you'll remember, and you don't really think it's a dream, but you'll go ahead and do the state check, and then you'll find you're dreaming. And welcome to a lucid dream. Really very smart. So there's one. And then the other one is something I didn't mention, but it's also very, very effective. And is again entailing prospective memory, prospective mindfulness. And you can do it tonight, if you wish. And that is as you're falling asleep, as you're falling asleep, then set a resolve, pempa they call it in Tibetan. You're looking to the future. It is exactly a prospective mindfulness that after you've fallen asleep, when you first have a sense of your waking up, not after you've already woken up, but be very keen when you first have the sense that, oh, I'm waking up. Recognize. If you've already woken up and you're going, oh, like that, it's too late. So try to get it as soon as you have the sense, oh, I'm waking up. Recognize I'm waking up. So that's the first thing, know something. And the second thing to do is as you're waking up, but hopefully not fully awake, not fully engaged with your room, your body, the environment, you're still just coming out of sleep, that having recognized as quickly as you can when you're coming out of sleep, then revert your awareness, look backwards, and recall what was the last thing you remember. It's very simple. What's the last thing you remember? An image, a person? Do you remember anything? Have you just come out of a dream? If you've just come out of the dream, see if you can remember the last frame, or even better yet, the last video clip. I was in the kitchen, I was talking with my brother, and he was talking about going for a hike. That's good enough. But even if it's just a slide, I was in the kitchen, or I was in the kitchen with my brother talking about going for a hike, then recall that, retrieve it, because it'd be very short-term memory, just a matter of maybe seconds or a minute ago. Retrieve that, and then do something more, and that is totally relax, and play that video again. Go right back to the kitchen, right back to the conversation, but you're going back in lucid. You're going right back in knowing you're about to re-enter a dream. And you may be able to pick up right where you left off. And that's not too hard. That's not too hard. So it's easy, yeah? Okay. One more point, again on lucid dreaming, that now we've gone beyond the Pali Canon, the Theravada, the Shravaka, the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika. In that context, sometimes called Hinayana, but I think generally Shravakayana is not pejorative for sure. In that context, there's just no references to praying to the Buddha. Because in that context, Buddha was enlightened a long time ago, he passed away, he's beyond. He's beyond, you can't contact him. And there's also no reference at all to praying to the Guru. You honor the Guru, listen to the Guru, help the Guru if he or she needs food or what have you. But praying to the Guru just never comes up. Why would you do that, you know? Whereas as soon as we're in Mahayana, and the notion of Buddha is not just a historical figure, but Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nimanakaya, and the ubiquitous or omnipresent nature of Dharmakaya, suffusing the mind streams of all beings, including yourself and your Lama or Lamas, then as soon as you're in Mahayana, let alone Vajrayana territory, then praying to the Buddha makes perfectly good sense. And if you're in Vajrayana, then praying to the Guru, indivisible from the Buddha, makes perfectly good sense. And it's generally said, I think for very good reason, in Vajrayana territory, that if you're really with heartfelt devotion, reverence, and faith, you're praying to the Guru, not simply as a human being, but rather indivisible from your personal deity, Tara, Majeshri, Padmasambhava, whoever, that if you have heartfelt faith, then you may receive very swift blessings from your Lama or Guru, very swift. And insofar as you're praying to your Yidam, your personal deity, Manjushri, whoever it may be, but again with heartfelt devotion, really calling out and having a sense someone's listening, you're not just talking to yourself, then you may receive very deep blessings. And if you see the two as indivisible, your personal deity and your Lama, then you may receive very swift and very deep blessings together. Very useful. And you might be surprised. You might be surprised. Somebody just a week ago or so wrote to me email, one of my students, and having a pretty major problem. And I just said, pray to Guru Rinpoche. You know, let me off the hook. Pray to Guru Rinpoche. And she said, what did she say, incredulous? I said, well, okay. She did. And then she wrote me right back a few days ago, the results were immediate and powerful. That whole problem just dissipated. I don't think she's alone there. That's not the first time that's ever happened. And so lucid dreaming, very rightly, is a secular practice. So notion of prayer, devotion doesn't come up, it's secular. Which means it can be Christian, it can be Muslim, it can be Buddhist, anything you like, because it's a floater. It can be just secular, or you can bring this into your religious worldview, whatever that may be. But here in the context of Mahayana Buddhism, then on the one hand, the prayer can be very useful, receiving blessings can be very useful, motivation is very useful, all of that is useful. So then it really incorporated. And specifically, and this is in the classic teachings on dream yoga, then as you're falling asleep, there's no reason you can't bring in methods from modern lucid dreaming, like the ones I just mentioned, but also, while lucid dreaming instruction says, as you're falling asleep, do so with a strong resolve, prospective memory. Tonight I will really, I will recognize the dream as the dream. That's good. And in the Mahayana Buddhist context, you're praying to the Guru, let's say Padmasambhava, your Yidam, tonight bless me that I may. Calling, invoking, I'm about to fall asleep now, I need some help here, bless me that tonight will be the night, you know, to be able to recognize the dream as the dream. So try that if you like. Hola so. Hola so. So when thoughts arise, it seems as though I can feel them arising as they do so, but cannot specifically attribute it to any physical location. Would this be a sensation or mental? It is indeed, this is a good point, and there's a real answer, I think to my mind, quite a conclusive answer, is that the thoughts are occurring only in the mental domain. The thoughts don't actually occur in your body or any of the sensory domains. But the issue of correlates does come up, not only mind-brain correlates, but there's a lot of research. Antonio Damasio has written a book, The Neurologist, The Feeling of What Happens, and showing that pointing out a true statement, that when we experience emotions, I think he uses the two words in the opposite way I do, but it doesn't matter, it's trivial. But when we experience an emotion, a mental event, fear, joy, sadness, that emotion, this is how I'm using the term in Buddhism, the emotion is a mental event, it's a mental process, and you perceive it in the mental domain. That's it, nowhere else. Nowhere else. You don't smell it, taste it, or anything. But when you're experiencing an emotion, it very often happens that there's a somatic correlate. The somatic correlate is not an emotion, but it's directly linked to it, just as the brain processes, the brain correlates of emotions. Well, they're very strongly correlated, certainly not the same. And so you may simultaneously experience an emotion which occurs in the mental domain and a correlated somatic sensation, often in the gut, sometimes the heart, sometimes the throat, sometimes the head, often related to chakras. So that might be useful. Yeah. So good. In awareness of awareness practice, can you say further instructions about how to differentiate between the object awareness and the visual stimuli? In awareness of awareness, you really have no interest in visual stimuli. Your eyes are open, but with no interest. So it would be as if on a nice warm Saturday afternoon you go out onto a field, lie on your back and you just daydream. You daydream about Tahiti or whatever. Your eyes are open, but you're just giving no interest whatsoever to the visual field. So really there should be no particular visual stimulus. It's not part of the practice. In awareness of awareness, difference between the object and awareness, well, your object is awareness. There's no object of attention outside of awareness. That's why there's no vector. It's just being aware of being aware. And again, the very important point to remember is that you're already aware of being aware. It's not something new that you have to try on and see whether you can succeed. It's rather a process of eliminating everything else, shaving everything else off, and then just resting in that which was already present effortlessly. You're already aware of being aware. And just rest in that. How do you say, without addition. A couple of things I'll read later. And then, okay. I suppose at some point in the future, humanity can build a machine, say an android, complex enough that you cannot distinguish if it is sentient or not. Will it be conscious? To my mind, it's open and shut. And that is, the fact that it can create a facsimile of speaking, responding, behavior basically. It may kind of look like a human being, but the fact that its behavior may be indistinguishable from the behavior of a human being does not in any way imply that it has the consciousness of a gnat, any more than an actor, a really superb actor. They can slip into any role, just melts into the role. And you look at this person and you just couldn't tell the difference between this person and a psychotic or a sociopath or a saint or what have you. Just, wow, I'm a total believer, you know. Does that make that person a sociopath or a saint? No, they're just good at faking it. So there's just no relationship. There's just no relationship. There are people who are conscious, like this Lama Karma that I mentioned, achieved shamatha and went into a 9-day samadhi. Well, he wasn't, but he had all the behavior of a doorknob. He's just sitting there in meditation. But he had more consciousness than a doorknob, because he's in samadhi. So there's just really no correlation at all between behavior that looks humanish and behavior that doesn't. Just sitting like a stone Buddha doesn't look humanish at all, but he was radiantly aware. And Siri, who many times can give answers that sounds like somebody's really listening and answering, and then sometimes obnoxiously doesn't even get close. And kind of, I said it already 3 times, Siri, what's your problem? And then you're acting like a silly person. There's just no correlation. So the notion that if it's so good you can't tell the difference, all that means is it's so good you can't tell the difference. But still, that android has no more consciousness than a doorknob. And so there it is. There's just no correlation. And the notion that if we can just get sufficiently complex algorithms in a computer, that's just hand-waving. It's sheer speculation with nothing behind it. So that's that. I am in practicing the techniques on thought observation. If we create a V or disturbing thought, is there karmic ransom to pay? That's a very good question. In other words, is there a karmic get out of jail free card when you engage in this mind training? Excellent question, very important. And again, the answer is definitive. And that is, bear in mind the karmic clock, that is, you're starting to accrue karma when there's an intention. Simply having a mental affliction arise is like coming down with a flu. It wasn't voluntary. Whether it's craving, it's hostility, it's pride, it's not something, oh, I think in 3 seconds I'm going to be arrogant. Oh, I am. It never works that way. So the arising of mental affliction is never intentional. They happen like catching the flu or sneezing. So there's no karma in just simply having a mental affliction arise. But now imagine the mental affliction is one of contempt, for example, nasty one. It just comes up when he's viewing the latest news and sees a certain politician does something contemptible. Oh, surprise, surprise. And it's simply, instead of focusing on contemptible behavior as contemptible behavior, which is being realistic, I'll say that again. When we see contemptible behavior being displayed to be sound and wise and intelligent, you recognize contemptible behavior as contemptible behavior. Behavior is not a person, and it's disgusting, appalling, and it should stop. And if you can vote that person out of office, do so quickly. It's perfectly good. But to conflate the contemptible behavior with a person and hold the person in contempt, then you've left the Buddhist path. You're not practicing Buddhism at that time, because no person is behavior, and behavior comes and goes. But the Buddha nature is there, the capacity for enlightenment is always there. So it's a sharp knife, but it's a very important one. That said then, when contempt comes up, you read a headline, oh, that's disgusting. And then if you just see it arising, but you're really practicing, then you just see contempt arising from the stillness of your awareness. And you look, yep, I've seen that one before, that's called contempt. And then it's gone. There's no karma there at all. Unless with a really bodhicitta motivation, you're deciding, now I'm going to really practice today. And when I see any thought, or especially mental affliction come up, I'm going to recognize it for what it is, so that I may swiftly achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And contempt arises, you recognize contempt as contempt, evaporates. That was actually a virtuous deed. Because the motivation was, I'm going to train my mind, I'm going to recognize mental afflictions as mental afflictions. So not only is that not non-virtuous, that's part of your practice. And if your motivation bodhicitta, that was right there, a bodhisattva deed, because you did it intentionally. If it comes up and it kind of gloms on you, like goo, yeah, and you're really feeling contempt, just what a terrible person, and so you're really experiencing contempt, but there's no intention at all. You're just feeling like that. Well, your mind is afflicted right now. It's not healthy. but there's no intention. So you're not accruing karma. It goes, bleh, contempt. And then you think, oh, I wish somebody would kill him. Oh, you just started karma. You just started karma. There's an intention. Oh, like that. As soon as there's intention, there it is. Even if nothing comes of it. An intention comes up and you, oh, well, you just got that much karma. That you'll not like the results of that. So it's not just that you get out of jail free card. It's much more nuanced than that. Okay? Very good, but very practical, important question. If that were not the case, then we could just never allow ourselves to observe mental afflictions without bringing a hammer out and trying to crunch them. And that's fine to do that. There are many methods for counteracting mental afflictions. Very skillful Sutrayana practice. But in Dzogchen, it's more subtle. Observe them and watch them destroy themselves, release themselves. Watch your mind heal from its own mental afflictions without your having to get in there and do some hard work, wrestling it to the ground. So these are all very practical. Good is the watcher, that is part of us that observes and gives a continuous, in my case, detached, non-grasping commentary on behaviors, feeling. Is that the same as the awareness that is aware of being aware? No. No, as soon as you say non-grasping commentary is the giveaway term. As soon as it's a commentary, that's discursive thought, evaluating, commenting, giving a commentary. That may be useful, but it's not any of the practices we've been doing. Not to say it's not useful. Many things are useful we're not doing here. But that's not awareness of awareness. Because of awareness is, it is a non-conceptual awareness of what's going on. Even the settling the mind in its natural state, as Lerab Lingpa said so clearly, it is a non-conceptual awareness of what arises in the mind, even if what is arising in the mind consists of thoughts. You're non-conceptually observing thoughts. Then you have that non-conceptual confidence that whatever comes up, it cannot possibly harm you. So this commentary, that may be very useful, but it's not this practice. So is resting in the stillness of awareness the same as being the watcher, which for once is being quiet? Well, that could be. Yeah, that could be. The watcher that is quiet. If you're not responding, reacting, evaluating, judging, commenting, then yeah, it's awareness of awareness. Is the dreamer of the lucid dream also the watcher? Yeah, for sure. And if you're having a lucid dream, of course, then you can be as active as you like. In a lucid dream, it's your music. You play the music any way you like. So it's more than simply being aware of. How has your subjective consciousness experience evolved since you started practicing Buddhism? Quite a bit. I first learned to meditate with Soto Zen Buddhists practicing Zazen. This is too much outside. This is a big question, but I'm just not and I have no professional training in Zazen. I know something about it, but I'm not going to try to handle comparative Zen to Dzogchen right now. Too big. Let's try to stay on topic. Oh, somebody took the bait. Let's see what they came up with. Flaws of Sautrantika view. Perceiving thoughts, beliefs, something, etc. as real will solidify, perceiving them, beliefs as real, will solidify dualistic thinking, leading to grasping, reification, mental afflictions, increased suffering. It certainly could. It certainly could. Does it need to, though? If it needs to, if that's necessarily part of the package of perceiving beliefs as inherently existent, which is true, mental processes and so forth are perceived as, or conceived as inherently existent in the Sautrantika system. Does that necessarily mean it's just a bad idea and that's a screwed up system? No, it's not that bad. This is part of Buddhism. It's not delusional. It could be mistaken, but it's not crazy. And here's how it's not slimpy delusional. And that is, you may be reifying the mental afflictions that come up, the emotions, the thoughts, memories, feelings. You may be seeing them as inherently real, which is, it's true in Theravada practice. But you're not identifying with them at all. See, these are two different things. Identifying with and simply reifying. Those are two different things. I can look at this cup, and I may reify it. Oh, it's really inherently existent. It's really there, without having any notion whatsoever that it's my cup. Right? If I have no notion whatsoever that it's my cup, then if it cracks or something, I'm not going to be unhappy. It's just a cup, right? And so if you don't identify with your mental afflictions and so forth, even though you're reifying, there'll be a lot less damage than if you reify them and you identify with them. So it's not simply a bad idea, it's just limited. And that's generally the Mahayana view on the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika. Not that you're just flat out wrong, like materialism flat out wrong. You have a lot of good going for you, but there's some assumptions you've not been checking. There are issues that really, there could be a lot of improvement. It's more like that. And then the second flaw, apparently, is things can have causal efficacy that aren't real, as a coiled rope mistaken for a snake causes fear to rise. Well, number one, the coiled rope is real, and mistaking it for a snake is real, and it causes fear that is real. It's mistaken, but this is perfect in the Course of Sautrantika. There's no fault yet. Let's see if we really come up with a fault. There is no questioning of direct perception or the consciousness doing the perceiving. Oh, but you are directly perceiving. The coiled rope is something you do perceive. You're misperceiving it. But nevertheless, yeah, you are perceiving it. So I don't think that's a flaw. Things deemed as real do not consider the causes or conditions leading to the sensations. Things deemed as real do not consider the causes or conditions leading to the creation of the object, thought, event. And that's not true. If you go to the Satipatthana Sutta, and for example, close application of mindfulness to the mind, it never comes up in that whole sutta that these events, the close application of mindfulness is looking at emotions and thoughts and mental afflictions, all kinds of things. It's a very large arena, it's a zoo. But there's no reference to them, no implication that any of these mental events you're attending to are not inherently real. It just doesn't come up. Nevertheless, you are closely following the teachings of the Buddha. You are closely examining the factors of origination. How do these events emerge? How are they present? How did they dissolve? So you can indeed consider the causes and conditions leading to the creation. Definitely you can. There's no reason you can't do that. And then fourth one, real things ignore the mind labeling the collection of parts of the object. They're not ignoring it. I think you need to give these people more respect. We're still talking about them 1,500 years later. If they were just stupid, we would have just forgotten them. No, calling things real, that's not ignoring mind labeling at all. It's just recognizing that this glass of water, I can call it a glass of water, I can also call it a shrimble toodlepoo. But it's still what it is. And glass of water is just easier to say than shrimble toodlepoo. You know? That's a new one, by the way. It's a floater. If you want to take it, you can have it. It's not trademarked yet. But what they're saying is, there's a glass of water there. You call it anything you like. You madhyamikas, call it anything you like. But get real. Shall I toss it in your face? You can call it anything you like. You can conceptually designate it any way you like. But if I chuck this water into your face, you're going to get wet. So how about a little taste of inherently existent water? Not too easy to refute. They know they're labeling, but they also think the labeling is completely trivial. Don't label it. It feels the same. Call it champagne. It's not. It doesn't matter what you call it. They know what they're doing. And they just don't think labeling is all that important. So I think they're a bit stronger than you thought. With respect to, I'll go for it, I raised it. With respect to matter-energy transference and quantum tunneling, is quantum tunneling a credible phenomenon in Tibetan Buddhism? What did Tsongkhapa say about quantum tunneling? I'm trying to remember. It's okay. I'll just go back to what this very, very erudite Geshe Ugen Seten. He was Geshe Ngawan Taigi as one of his gurus, and he came to Tarpa-Churling, our monastery in Switzerland, for a month. I was translating for him. He was the one that told me just about exactly 41 years ago, as I was just getting some interest in quantum mechanics, just reading some general books. He said, we're not refuting elementary particles. We're not refuting atoms. Not doing that. We're questioning how they exist, not whether they exist. So if first-rate, mainstream, very credible physicists, quantum physicists, with good reason, say that quantum tunneling is really feasible, then we say, cool. Is it inherently existent? We'll talk. But we're not going to refute them on that point. They probably have mathematics, technology, all kinds of things behind that statement. So we're not going to say, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I know better. We don't do that. So, okay, a lot of practical questions. Focusing my attention on the space of the mind and its contents is more challenging for me than single-pointed concentration on one object. Yeah? Different strokes for different folks, we say. The latter is relaxing, usually. The former drains energy, like playing a mental game of whack-a-mole, as it is unpredictable what comes next. That's true. Is this typical? Can shamatha be achieved in this way? Can shamatha be achieved by focusing single-pointedly on one object? Yeah. Yeah. The Buddha taught 40 different methods on different objects. So yeah, like Kawabunga, definitely yes. And then whether it's typical, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd have to do a whole poll and ask how many people have that experience. It doesn't really matter whether it's typical. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is that your experience, and if you find it with a certain method, it's just draining you, and find another method. Okay, this is fair enough. This is in reference to my conversation with Dudjom Rinpoche just about a week ago, when he said Tibetans really like the ritual and the chanting and the moving and doing and all of that kind of thing. He wasn't being pejorative. He did say blind faith. He did say that. So that's what we had. It's not a virtue. But he's also just correct. Uncritical faith. It's called blind faith. So he said they really like that. Some Westerners do as well, and some don't care for it. And so the question is, could you please clarify your attitude, my attitude, toward practices of Vajrayana that utilize ritual objects and the recitation of mantra? I've done them myself, and they can be extremely meaningful. They can be very transformative if you make them meaningful. But you can also just go through the outer movements, and it can be as empty as changing a tire in a car. It's all up to you. So I never feel pejorative. I really never feel pejorative about ritual objects or recitation of mantra. I do it every single day. Or ritual. Ritual, for many people throughout the world of all different types of religions, find ritual just tremendously enriching for their lives, transformative, meaningful. That's a fact. So I'm not going to dispute that. And I know from my own experience, I'll only point my finger at myself. Have I, over the years, especially during the years that I was a monk and we had to do liturgies and chanting every single day, was it on occasion just a routine I was waiting to be over, waiting for it to get over so I can get onto something more interesting? Yeah. In which case, for me, that particular chanting, liturgy, and so forth, and I had my bell and vajra, it was, on occasion, it was just empty. But that's not the problem. That's not the problem of the liturgy or the ritual or the just I wasn't bringing any meaning to it, so it's nobody else's fault. So in referring to your comments, that's the razzmatazz. Well, I mean, razzmatazz is kind of a lighthearted, not meant to be pejorative, but it's colorful. Some people say Tibetan Buddhism is quite baroque. That's not pejorative either. It's just it is. This is disturbing my mind, to say the least. Oh, it shouldn't. To speak lighthearted, razzmatazz. Was it for bored Tibetans? No, I don't think that that was never implied. He never said that, never implied that. We're talking about Dudjom Rinpoche here. Did he say that all the colorful liturgy, the chanting, the bells and so forth are for bored Tibetans? Did he say that? No. Didn't say anything like it. Not at all. He never implied or stated, oh, and it's a waste of time, what goofballs, those Tibetans are so silly. He's a Tibetan living in Tibet. He's not going to say that. What he did say is for many, many Tibetans, if you teach them shamatha, they find that boring. It's a fact. So please don't be disturbed. Nothing to be disturbed about. Can I explain the process of dying in more detail? Sure. Not right now. It's a big topic. But yeah, it'll come. It will come during the latter part of probably the last day or so. Don't really understand. I have dealt with this. It's important, but I'll deal with it now very briefly. Where does free will fit with motivation, commitment, or intention? Is it being exercised when we do not follow thoughts along with training the mind? Free will. As I mentioned, the question of do human beings have free will or not is a question that's been running through theology, philosophy, and science for up to 1,500 years with no consensus. And that's just a fact, no consensus. People feeling very strongly yes or no. My favorite response to that one, I have to say, because I really enjoy it a lot, the favorite response to do I have free will is from the Jewish novelist Isaac Bashevis Singer. Very, very gifted novelist. I read a number of novels a long time ago. Very thoughtful man and writes beautifully. And he was asked once, do you believe you have free will? And he said, of course. Do I have any choice? And it's really very, very clever, very thoughtful. And so free will, it's so, I really like that answer, frankly. In contrast to Einstein, who I respect in so many different ways, there's an article I have on my laptop from 1929 or so. It was an interview, and he was saying, I do not believe in free will. He really was a classicist in many ways. In terms of causality, he didn't buy quantum mechanics at all. He never liked it. And so he's really more 19th century kind of guy when it comes to causality. And he felt all of our actions are kind of predetermined by physical factors and so forth. So he said, I do not believe we have free will. But then he very thoughtfully but strangely said, of course I can't live that way. And that is, I have to hold people morally responsible. He'd witnessed the Nazi Holocaust, for heaven's sakes, and how many other awful things that have happened in the 20th century. So it's something he said he believed, but he could not live in accordance with what he said he believed, because he knew that would be catastrophic. That everybody would get a free ticket. There would be no moral responsibility for anything. So I think he didn't think that one through. He didn't think that one through. If you say you believe it, but then you refuse to live in accordance with it, then you don't really believe it, or something's really off. So can you feel or hear wind along the spine from the cranial sacral? I can't. That doesn't say you can't. And if by wind you mean prana, which I think is really a terrible translation. It's used, and by respectable translators, but to translate the pranas as winds, there's a different word in Tibetan for wind. It's lakpa. That means wind. And then there's prana in Sanskrit, or lung, and that's a different term entirely. So I just think wind is just not a good translation, especially if you think about passing wind. It's a different meaning. So I really think, even though it's a bit, maybe it's not really New Agey, but I think energy is just closer. Vital energy is even closer, so I stick with that one. Could you experience vital energy along the spine? Sure. No question. But winds, I don't think so. Unless you have a hollow spine and somebody's blowing through it. So you say, don't get caught up with thoughts, but what about when you are thinking about the Dharma, when you are trying to work things out, understand what you're doing? Don't get caught up in thoughts. When I say that, good question, very practical. When I say don't get, I'm giving the teachings. And the teaching said when you're practicing these methods, don't just get carried away and caught up and distracted by thoughts. If you are, you're just sitting there daydreaming or ruminating. You don't need to learn how to do that. We're already expert. But it's kind of an interesting question. And that is, as I mentioned from Yangtan Rinpoche's advice between sessions, He didn't say never think at all, simply observe every thought comes up. He just said, let that be your baseline, and then he implied, because it's obvious, that if something comes up where you need to, balance your checkbook, or you need to do something with your intellect, do it, finish it, and put the concepts down. And so similarly, when you're thinking about Dharma, reflecting upon Dharma, remember the 3 types of understanding, or wisdom. The understanding wisdom understanding that comes from hearing, listening to the teachings, and then you reflect upon them, you examine them, you critique them, you investigate them. That's thinking about the Dharma, and a whole other bandwidth of understanding, wisdom will arise from that, and then there's meditation, and a deeper understanding comes from that. But I'll add, so sure, think about Dharma. There's no injunction not to. You just don't do that while you're settling the mind in its natural state, any more than you plow a field and go to the bathroom at the same time. They're both perfectly good, but probably not in the tractor. Right? I never know what's coming up, it just comes, it just comes out. But it worked, didn't it? But what I do know, because I do it every single day, especially when I'm teaching, but every single day even when I'm not teaching, is when I go to bed at night, I know what the notes are going to be for the next morning, so that's already in my mind. Then I wake up pretty early. I have a number of things I do early in the morning, but one of them is I just scan through, look over the notes that are coming up. I know them, but I look over, this is the portion to this morning, and I just look at them, I just sow the seeds. Oh, that's the material. And then I spend at least an hour, sometimes more, simply in resting in awareness, and I'm not thinking about those are the notes, what shall I say this first, what meditation, I'm not thinking about it, I'm resting in awareness. But I've sowed the seeds. I'll be leading a session this morning, and there's the material, that's sown, and then I don't think about it. I'm just resting in awareness. And every single time, I mean, really, I can't remember when there was an exception. Every single time when I'm just resting there, then, whoop, good idea. Whoop, yeah. And then by the time I finished, then I know what I'm going to do for the morning. But it just comes up. And it wasn't planned, it just came up. And so that happens a lot. It happens a real lot. I went to a 6-month retreat many years ago with having done all the research for my doctoral dissertation at Stanford. And I just wanted a break. I just went up in the mountains and disappeared for 6 months. And I was just besieged with thoughts and insights and things pertaining to my dissertation that were fresh, novel, useful. And I didn't go up there to think about my dissertation, anything but the seeds were all sown, and I had all this space. And so a lot of what I wrote in this book, Taboo of Subjectivity, which is one of my 2 dissertations at Stanford, came out of that time. And they would come, and then I would say, okay, it's good, and I write them down and then set them aside. Because I didn't come up there to think about dissertation, but a lot of good ideas came out. Is it possible to remember past lives in lucid, deep, dreamless sleep? Yeah, it's possible. Because in lucid, you're resting right there in the substrate. And in the Buddhist hypothesis, here it is, that's where all your memories are, from this lifetime and past lifetime. Are feeling Vedana mental or tactile or both? Very good. Not only mental and tactile. Feelings, again, the terminology is very precise in the Buddhist languages, Sanskrit, Pali, and so forth, and really vague in English. The best one for Vedana is feeling. It's feeling. And feeling, Vedana, are just simple. It's positive, neutral, and negative affect. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, nothing more. So sensations, firmness, solidity, and so forth, and all of it, those are not feelings, those are sensations. It's very clear, but in English, feeling covers so much territory, right? I kind of have a feeling it's going to rain tomorrow, etc. It's all over the place. But in Buddhism, feeling is just spot on, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, but it's not just mental or tactile. And we all know that. And that is, I'm just looking at Casca's, my eyes lit on her blanket there. I come from a Scottish background. Nice looking shawl you got there, Casca. I look at it, I find it pleasing. It's a pleasant looking shawl. So I'm looking at it, this is visual. And I'm seeing it with some pleasure. It has a nice color, right? And then I don't know if I can find anything that, yeah, that. It's okay, but it's not what I would choose. A bright light beaming right into my eyeballs. So it's so mild, it doesn't matter. But very mild, really, so don't do anything about it. But yeah, if I could just turn that one off, I would. But that's visual. And then, when you're on the radio, or let's say just music, is there any music you like and then some you don't like? That's feeling in the way you're hearing the music. And then you say, that music is really good and that's really bad. But I'm listening to this music and pleasant feelings arise in my listening to it, unpleasant, and this is just, may as well be just noise. So it's for all, and then scents, fragrances, and tastes, so it's for all the 6 domains. Feeling arises in all the 6 domains, not just mental and tactile. And it's in the mode that we experience the object, but then ever so often we say, oh, that's a beautiful piece of art. Like the modern art that I saw at the the Glasgow Museum of Modern Art. And one person might say, wow, that's just a beautiful piece. And they'll see that piece with pleasure, and they say, that is real art. And I'll look at it as a California country bumpkin. I said, a 5-year-old could have done that. Why is it here? If that were in my backyard, I'd throw it out. And then we can have a disagreement. It's art. I say, no, it's junk. No, it's art, junk. And what we're disagreeing about something we can't disagree on, because I can't persuade him to stop have pleasant feelings, and he can't persuade me to stop having, you got to be kidding feelings. You know? So this is what we commonly do. The feeling is always in the mode that we experience something, but then we say, he's attractive, that's a beautiful music, that's a great place, this is a great restaurant, and so forth. And all we're saying is, I experience that as pleasant, and then we objectify it. We see that, then there can be a lot fewer argumentation. So I'm struggling to let go of the idea that will, the initiation of agency, is not a basis of designation of I or self. Who said it's not? Who said it's not? Why not? Intention, if I say, I am intending to put this paper aside within a matter of 30 seconds, I'm intending to do that. The basis of designation of I am intending is the mental event of intention. Sure, why not? So there are no objective constraints. I'll choose my words very carefully. There are no objective constraints inherently from the side of objects that determines what you can and cannot point to as a basis of designation for yourself. I'll give an example I like a lot. Have you ever been in one of those big public garages where there are hundreds and hundreds of cars, multiple layers, and you forget your car is, and then you're wondering, and then you say, ah, there I am. Ever done that before? Many people do. Oh, or you go beep, beep, and it goes beep, beep. Like, you know, the cow and the calf. Oh, my calf just beeped. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, there I am. You can designate your car. The car can be your basis of designation of yourself. Oh, I'm over there. Right? No problem. Anything that we accept conventionally, if somebody said that and everybody else around you and said, you got to be kidding, you're not a car, are you insane? Then we wouldn't say that, you know. But I've heard that and nobody said, oh, you're insane, in which case then it's okay. Oh, I'm over there. Cool. Well, that's so. Okay, last one. Practical. I love practical. And the practical is I'm putting this down. Let's see what this last one is. How ought I to do daytime dream yoga and ask myself questions such that I am applying this awareness to sleep as I become lucid? Happily, that's the question I answered right at the beginning. Remember? With looking for anomalies and dream signs, recognizing them, and then doing something. And Stephen does add, include the critical reflexive attitude, and that is, do genuinely ask yourself. Don't just go through an empty ritual. But when you see an anomaly or a dream sign, do pause just for a moment and seriously ask yourself, might I be dreaming? And then do the state check. Otherwise, that too could be turned into an empty ritual. So, it's at 9 o'clock, and what I'd like to do now that we're in Mahayana territory, we're now going to be in Buddhism all the way through, and all those quotes from the scientists, they'll be waving to us from the bleachers, but we'll really be focusing, I'm very happy to do so, on the Buddhist material. Since we're there, I think it would be quite appropriate to end this evening together, this day together, in a very meaningful and traditional way, and that is, you know what's coming. I am confident that our time together has been very meaningful. There's been a lot of virtue here. It's been authentic Dharma transmitted, listened to, and put into practice. So there's virtue here, virtue from my side and everybody's side. And so virtue is like money in the bank. It's a really kind of a positive energy that you can direct where you will. And so as we come to the end of this day, I invite you then to dedicate the merit, the virtue, the positive energy of the day, but in a very personal way. So at this point, it would be very easy to do some liturgy and recite some prayers from Tibetan or translations of Tibetan. And I think that's fine. I think it's really, really fine. I personally do that every night, the last thing before I go to sleep. But it's not really what I want to do now. What I'd invite us to do for just a couple of minutes, very short, is as we just go into silence, then review the day, what you brought to the day, how meaningful, beneficial, virtuous it was, individually, and then bring to mind your most meaningful aspirations. What would you like to see come from the time and effort and money you've invested here, your ongoing practice? What would you like to see come from this? What would you like to see? Short term, how would you like to see this play out? What benefits would you love to see flow out of your involvement in this retreat? Dedicate the merit to that if you see them to be meaningful. You can think longer term as well. You can think multiple lifetimes. You can think bodhicitta, dedicate it to your own achievement and enlightenment for the sake of all beings. You can dedicate it multiple times. It's not like you've used up the money and I can't dedicate it anymore. You can keep on dedicating it. And so you can dedicate, and then along your own stream of anticipating your own future, how would you like to see the benefits flow out in your own life, your own personal evolution? But of course, none of us exist in isolation. And so as we envision what benefits would you love to see flow from this, then we can also think not only short-term and long-term, but for ourselves and others. What kind of benefit would we love to see flow out into the world, that we can make this time as meaningful as possible? So I'm very keen on that, to make time as meaningful as possible, because it's very finite, the time we have. And if it's pissed away or just killed, never get it back again. Money you can lose and then get more. You never get more time. It's gone, it's finished. And so at the beginning of the day, before we gather at 9:30, that's mid-morning, then setting the motivation to as meaningful as possible. How meaningful it is up to you. I'll do my best, but really how meaningful it is up to you. I'll just help you. Then through the day we carry that motivation, our practice, attending teachings, reflecting upon them, imbued with the motivation. At the end of the day, dedicating merit. Then each day is like a life. It's like a life. Because after all, at the end of the day, you're going to die. Very briefly and only temporarily, but your mind is going to slip right into the substrate consciousness, which is where you go when you die. Your body won't die, that's good. Hopefully not. But you will slip into the substrate. And then you'll have multiple rebirths over the night, 5 to 7, reincarnations and dreams. And then tomorrow you'll begin again, another life. So these little microcosms, very meaningful. Can be. So if you're with me, let's just spend a couple of minutes quietly dedicating merit. Let's bring the session to a close. And with the very happy awareness that our practice may be very simple. It may be mindfulness, mindfully breathing in and breathing out. Practice taught so frequently by the Buddha. And it can be tremendously meaningful, deeply meaningful, transformative, because of motivation. And the more understanding we can bring to it, then meaningful that way as well. It's not just a little technique. So how meaningful a simple practice, mindfulness of breathing in, is all up to us. How deep the meaning, the motivation, how much wisdom we can bring to it, then it'd be tremendously meaningful. It's even taught in Vajrayana. Mindfulness of breathing is taught in the Manjushri Mula Tantra. Yeah. So it's not just Theravada or something like that. So now, so within a couple of hours, I imagine we'll be falling asleep. So you might experiment with the awareness of awareness. It's really nice. It's very sleek. Not elaborated, not complicated. But you finish the day, you dedicated merit, you've done everything for the day. And then you just lay down, if you like. I do. I go in the Shavasana first, even if it's just for a short time. I always go there first. Sometimes a longer time, sometimes shorter. But just resting right there, just ever so streamlined, simple. It doesn't arouse or agitate the mind at all. But you're going right into the slipstream of the clarity of awareness. So if you just release any attachment, grasping to identifying with the mind or the body, and just rest in that simplicity, you can see how far you can go from night to night to resting in that natural clarity. I often think of it as like holding a candle as you go down a tunnel. And you go deeper down the tunnel, and you're just holding that clarity of awareness. And then it's just so relaxed, so at ease, so letting go, that your body falls asleep. And I've experienced this sometimes where I've done it, and I know perfectly well that I'm clear. I mean, you're lucid or you're not. The awareness is perfectly clear, and I hear somebody snoring. And it's my body snoring. And I said, you're asleep, I'm not. Pipe down a little bit, I'm going to toggle you. But you can just rest in that simple clarity, and the body can fall asleep. And then the mind also can get drowsy. The mind is drowsy, your awareness is clear, and the mind can fall asleep. It's not that difficult. So have a good night's sleep. See you tomorrow morning.